Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today I have a review for you that is probably of one of the books that will make it into my top 5 favorite books of the year for me. And that book is Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. This is Ava Reid's second novel. It is set in the same world as her first novel, which was The Wolf and the Woodsman. Also, as always, this review will be spoiler free. I will start with a little synopsis and then go into my thoughts on this. But as I said, this book is Ava Reid's second novel. It's set in the same world. However, you really don't have to read The Wolf and the Woodsman to get this. It's mostly just, you know, some ethnic groups were the same within this book, but I don't believe it's even set in the same country, if I remember correctly, or even within the same, you know, time as The Wolf and the Woodsman. So in this book we follow Malinchen, and Malinchen is the youngest of 3 sisters. She and her 2 sisters live with her father, who is the last wizard of Oblia, within the city of Oblia, which just gets more and more modern and more industrial. Their father does not really like that. He is very xenophobic. He is very grumpy is too light a word. He's a very angry man who has been living under a curse for a long time, and he doesn't let Malinchen and her sisters out of his sight, like, whatsoever. Nevertheless, the 2 older sisters regularly sneak out at night, and one night they take Malinchen with them to Oblia's ballet theater, and there she sees a dancer who instantly has her enchanted. And so Malinchen starts to sneak out of the house by herself. Meanwhile, there's also a monster on the loose in Oblia that is killing people. And yeah, it's a whole mess. The story is kind of about Malinchen just finding her own strength within herself and getting out from under the boot of her father, as well as her more cruel sisters. So, what were my thoughts on this? First of all, I already did enjoy Ava Reid's debut novel, The Wolf and the Woodsman. I wasn't the biggest fan of the romance in Wolf and the Woodsman. I mean, I didn't rate books last year, but I would have given it about like a 4-star probably. However, this book absolutely blew me away. First of all, the writing style. And I'm gonna compare it to The Wolf and the Woodsman a lot, by the way. Well, I guess at least the writing style, but in The Wolf and the Woodsman, I already enjoyed the writing style, but it was mostly, yeah, I enjoyed it, and then every now and again there were just quotes that were absolutely breathtaking and that I really loved. Within this book, Ava Reid's writing style improved so much that, like, I feel like the whole book was on the level where just a few quotes were in The Wolf and the Woodsman, and then there were some quotes that were even more above that. But, you know, just the difference between the gorgeous quotes that made a point and that are just so quotable, and, you know, the just normal text of the book wasn't as big as it was within The Wolf and the Woodsman. So yeah, if you're a fan of just beautiful, lyrical, metaphor-heavy prose, definitely go for this book. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely loved it. Then aside from that, there were a lot of criticisms of this book, that apparently it's over-sexualized and Malinchen is over-sexualized. To be fair, I did not read those reviews because I can't be bothered, frankly. But I don't really see the over-sexualization of this book. There were like, yeah, there were some sex scenes, but I wouldn't say that they were overly graphic. There were also, like, there is a masturbation scene quite soon in the book, but so what? And yeah, Malinchen is the survivor of sexual assault. She's the survivor of sexual assault. And I think it might have made some people uncomfortable that on the one hand Malinchen, but also the love interest that she meets later on in the book, both are survivors, are sexual abuse survivors. and yet they still find sexual joy in each other. I think that might have made some people uncomfortable. However, I honestly mostly found it beautiful because I just, in general, as I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of the romance in The Wolf and the Woodsman. I really was a fan of the romance in here, because it's just, it was this beautiful thing where you just had two absolutely broken people who, within the other, on the one hand kind of saw themselves, but also for the first time saw someone who saw them and who saw not how broken they were, but kind of how broken they were. But together they managed to heal each other again, or start to heal each other again. And I think that was a really beautiful thing to read about and a really beautiful thing to see. And just in general, I mean, I've also seen criticisms that the romance in this book was quite insta-lovey, which I guess it was. It was definitely insta-infatuation with each other, and very, you know, drawn to each other. But for me, I didn't really mind that. I didn't really mind that the two of them were so in love with each other and so infatuated with each other. Because for me, this book very much doesn't fall into the space of your regular fantasy, but almost in the space of a fairy tale retelling, dark fairy tale, modern fairy tale. And for me, those types of stories are very trope heavy, and they very much rely on cliches to tell their story and to tell their metaphors. And so it wasn't about, you know, genuinely building up the chemistry between the two love interests and to slowly have them discover each other, which I do think was there, by the way, but it was more about what the two of them can do for each other in terms of healing each other and in terms of symbolizing healing as well. And, you know, the symbolism of their love and of their love making, I guess. And I think that was something that was there with a lot of aspects of this book that I think some people found over-sexualized. Where sometimes, you know, there were scenes that were boobs out, things were happening. That I think, especially if you come from a very prudish American or US American standpoint, can seem quite sexual. But when I read those scenes, they weren't necessarily sexual, they were more metaphorical. And, you know, there was a lot of religious metaphor as well woven into the story that I just genuinely really enjoyed. I also just enjoyed Marlinchen as a character. I really felt with Marlinchen as a character because she was a victim of her father. And her sisters just as much were victims of her father. However, her sisters, especially her oldest sister, all her life has been incredibly cruel to her. And I think something that comes through very well in this book is that, you know, perpetrator and victim aren't necessarily two separate people or two separate positions. A person can be a victim just as much as a perpetrator, and being a perpetrator doesn't invalidate their victimhood, but also them being a victim doesn't excuse them from being a perpetrator of violence, if that makes sense. And I think that came through a lot within the family dynamics, just the family dynamics in general, the trauma that was there within this family just was raw and was, I hate to say it, beautiful. Like the way the story was told, it was just, it wasn't the trauma itself that was beautiful, obviously. The trauma was horrible. It was written about in a beautiful way. Does that make sense? It was dealt with in a beautiful way. And that's, I think Marlinchen might be one of my favorite characters that I have read about so far this year, like one of my new favorite characters that I have read about this year, because yeah, she's so strong and she's so kind. And I think a lot of times we see kindness as a weakness, especially in fantasy. It is often dealt with as a weakness because kindness often comes with naivete. And Marlinchen herself is very naive throughout a lot of the story. And it's just hard because you see how naive she is and you see how much she went through. But the things that she went through, you'd think a person like that couldn't be naive anymore. But she still has this trust in people at the same time. And yeah, it's just, I really adored this book. I really love this book. My voice is slowly leaving me right now because I'm still kind of sick, still kind of have a cold. So since obviously I don't know anymore how to tell you to read this book in more ways than I have already said, I will just say it once again. If you love adult fantasy that have very much horror, dark fairy tale vibes, I think you will absolutely love this book. If you love fantasy with beautiful prose, you will also love this book. And if you love fantasy with characters that are just good from the bottom of their heart, then you will also love this book, because I think we just get way too little of those characters. So yeah, tell me in the comments down below, have you read the book? Do you feel similarly to me when it comes to this book? Also, if you haven't read the book, did I make you want to pick it up? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left linked down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!